So, good evening, everyone. Uh, at the outset, I would like to convey my sincere regards to Khaki Lab for such a wonderful opportunity to interact and share my work with you. As you know, today's discussion is centered around Shakta Tantrism. So, let us first understand the kind of subject we are dealing with. In the title, the phrase beyond the text is mainly pointing to the reflection of the main idea about knowledge within Shakta Tantra. First of all, the term knowledge here is not just what you read and understand through literary sources and conversing with others, but it encompasses much wider concept of jnana, that is wisdom. So this knowledge or jnana is not confined to textual study at all, but is realized through practice, embodiment, and lived experience. So this is exactly our map to understand the subject of matter today. Now, looking into the nature of the topic, we are engaging with a field whose very boundaries are debated in multiple ways, particularly in terms of the originality and chronology of its source materials. Why we are stressing on the source materials? Because in any literary, historical, or any kinds of inquiry, our understanding depends fundamentally on the sources we rely on because we get information from that sources and they shape how we interpret it, how we reconstruct it, how we make sense of the subject as a whole from the sources. So it is precisely this reliance on and the limitation of textual sources that leads us to the focus of today's discussion. So, in the course of this presentation, I will move through some of the key conceptual foundations, the textual landscape, and what may be called the experiential grammar of the tradition, while continually returning to a guiding question. So, our main question throughout the presentation will be what is that the text gestures towards but does not fully contain. So, throughout the presentation, you will understand why I'm more stressing on beyond the text. This phrase is very important because it shows us that what text gestures toward but does not fully contain. Okay, so let us begin with the word itself. Because the term Tantra is neither inherently exotic nor mysterious, once you will understand its linguistic and philosophical dimensions. Because the word derives from the Sanskrit verbal root Tan, meaning to spread, to stretch, and to weave. So, in its earliest sense, therefore, Tantra signifies the spreading of knowledge and the weaving together of principles into the systematic whole. Now, traditionally looking, the term came to denote a body of technical spiritual knowledge dealing with cosmic principles. We call it as a tattva. Okay, in Sanskrit, we call tattva means cosmic principles. Then mystic sounds are there. We call it as a mantra. Then ritual technologies are also with them. That is the way or methods through you are applying that tantra or applying the textual study, and that intend to bridge the human and the divine. Okay, so Tantra here is regarded within the tradition as a form of agama. Okay, agama is the form of text and it means revelation because most of the agamas they reveal you the like truth or the conversation between guru and shishya, and through that conversation you will understand the actual information about the universe. Okay, that is on the level of jnana, not only knowledge or not only bookish knowledge. Right. So these agamas or revelation, they claim authority comparable to the Vedas, while simultaneously affirming both the transcendence of Brahman, that is called as like supreme knowledge, Brahman, and the reality of the world as manifestation of Shakti. So now we are talking about Shakti. Okay, what is particularly significant about Tantra is its synthetic character because it synthesizes many dimensions that from philosophical systems which they keep separate. The first of this dimension is relationship between doctrine and practice. So in Tantra, philosophical insight and ritual action are inseparable. One cannot possess the map without understanding the journey. Okay, so knowledge is not merely speculative but transformative. It is not ending somewhere, but it is transforming like energy, right? It requires embodied discipline and lived realization. And the second synthesis I'm talking about is between the sacred and the everyday world. Whereas several spiritual traditions advocate that you have to withdraw from worldly existence, whereas Tantra proposes that your human body and the cosmos are compared of the same divine fabric. we call, right, like in every creature we have, we can see the god or we can see the divine. The same sense, same philosophy is here in the tantra, that your body and cosmos is the same fabric or is originated from same divine fabric. Then the individual and the universe are therefore understood as interconnected expressions of one sacred reality. So here, because of this weaving together, all the philosophies of metaphysics, ritual, then cosmology and embodiment, the word tantra eventually came to signify a comprehensive treatise. You cannot take one book or one tantra book and understand the tantra. Okay, you have to understand a complete system of spiritual understanding and practice rather than mere ritual manual or abstract philosophical text. So at its core, tantra is best understood not as a rigid belief system but as a distinctive mode of perception. We call it as a tantric vision. Vision we know, but what is tantric vision? This phrase is crucial here because vision differs fundamentally. Like if I am seeing this slide, you are also seeing this slide, but the way I am seeing this slide, the way I know the information about, maybe you don't know that much, or maybe you don't know more than me. So that vision is very important in tantric practices. So here one does not simply adopt a vision intellectually, rather one cultivates it, rather one trains it. You have to train your perception until reality itself appears transformed, right? So the tantric vision see the world as saturated within divine energy or shakti. So what tantra says, this all energy is together in shakti, that is energy. Okay, so there is no person called as shakti, but there is an energy, form of energy, right? Every object here, sensation, then moment of experience is viewed not as spiritually neutral but as alive with sacred presence. So you are alive in that practice. You are alive whenever you are reading the sacred text of tantra, you are practicing it, you are alive there. Okay, you don't have to leave your body. You have to come with your body, you have to come with your perception, and then you have to cultivate it. Okay, then the next thing is the body, nature, sound, desire, and even ordinary daily life become potential sites of revelation here. From this follows one of the tantra's most radical proposition, that it says the world is not an obstacle to liberation but the very field in which liberation is realized. So many philosophies you will see, they say you have to leave the material world, you have to leave the daily activities and go to somewhere and then attain the liberation or moksha. But here tantra is saying, tantra's philosophy lies in this statement, that world is not obstacle for your liberation, but your body itself is a field where you can work and get liberation and get realization, how you have content with or full with divine. Okay, so these certain strands of Indian philosophy, there is a one term also, Maya, okay, or illusion. We call it as a Maya Jal. So uh, in this term, Tantra argues that the problem lies not in the world itself, but in the contracted and limited way in which it is perceived. Again, the vision concept will be here, because if you are not understanding Tantra or the concept of Tantra from that vision, you will call it as a secretive or it's a very unnatural thing. So this is not a thing regarding Tantra, because philosophy is completely different from this. Now spiritual practice, coming to the spiritual practice, therefore aims not at escaping existence but at removing the filters that is stopping you to go towards that path. So this is the whole philosophy or the basic concept of tantra. It was necessary to situate the whole topic here. So this was necessary introduction for the tantra. Then core philosophy of the tantra, what it says. So this philosophical orientation is grounded in the principle of microcosm and macrocosm. Okay, both are different terms, microcosm and macrocosm. They are fundamentally identical, but they are different. So the human body is understood as a miniature universe, okay, containing within itself all the structures and energies present in the cosmos. Consequently, Tantra rejects the notion that spiritual realization requires abandoning embodiment. Instead, the body becomes the primary instrument of realization. So, this is the concept of microcosm, where the core metaphysical framework of this worldview is expressed through the unity of Shiva and Shakti. Okay, these two are again not a person. As you can see the illustration, they are expressed through person, but they are energies, different energies, Shiva and Shakti. They are also called as Purusha and Prakriti. This duality is there. Okay, so Shiva represents pure consciousness, while Shakti signifies creative power and dynamic energy. So in one person, both Shiva and Shakti is there, both Purusha and Prakriti is there. Purusha does not only mean Purusha means man, and Prakriti is female or women. So here in your everyone's body, Purusha, Prakriti, Shiva, Shakti, everyone is there because you have consciousness plus energy. Because Tantra insists that these two principles are inseparable. How? Consciousness cannot exist without energy. If you have consciousness, what to do in your daily life or what to study, what to read, but you don't have energy, you will not be able to do that work. And the same applies vice versa. Like energy cannot manifest without consciousness, right? So in this way, Tantra also resolves the classical duality between Purusha, that is spirit, and Prakriti, that is matter or nature. Rather than privileging spirit over matter, Tantra affirms both as complementary dimensions of a single divine reality. I just told you that in a single body, single physical body, you will see Purusha element also, Prakriti element. The same thing Tantra is affirming, that saying there is a single divine reality. Then the world is therefore not rejected but recognized as a sacred expression of consciousness itself. You are understanding through your consciousness what to do, and you need both the things, that conscious intuition and plus on your nature or energy, right? So the embodied dimension of Tantra becomes especially evident in its understanding of ritual practice. Now we are coming to like actual practice, ritual practice, and human body. So human beings naturally seek enjoyment rather than absolute renunciation, and Tantra responds to this condition by integrating disciplined enjoyment with spiritual transformation. So we call Madhyama Marga sometimes, that is middle path. You don't have to starve your body to do any meditation. We do fasting, but we don't understand the core of that. Like that, you have to understand the balance of both things, that is disciplined enjoyment and spiritual transformation. Unlike earlier Vedic ritual systems that often separated ritual performance from philosophical realization, Tantric rites require meditative identification between the aspirant, means the who is actually meditating or practicing the Tantra, and the deity, which he or she is practicing on. Whatever is deity, male, female, that doesn't matter here. So, a distinctive feature of this tradition is the centrality of the divine feminine. It's always in every single Tantra. If you will take Shiva Tantra or Shaiva Tantra, there you will find Shiva as the supreme deity of that tantra. In Vaishnava Tantra, Vishnu is the supreme. In Shakta Tantra, Shakti is the supreme. So here also distinctive feature of this centrality is divine feminine. Divine is something who has divinity or divine characteristics like deities or gods or goddesses, and feminine is simply women or a female energy. And the Tantras further classify practitioners according to three dispositions. So, for the practitioner, means who is doing that practices, they are divided into three parts, okay, or three categories. First is Pashu Bhava, that the practitioner who have animal or Pashu Bhava or that sense. Then Veera Bhava, that is heroic, and Divya Bhava, that is divine, which correspond to progressive stages of spiritual refinement. You cannot like wake up today and just become divine like practitioner. You have to start with the that journey, and in that journey, the next stop after the achievement, you will understand how you are achieving that spiritual understanding. Then you will get what is Pashu Bhava, Veera Bhava, and Divya Bhava. Okay. So through this disciplined ritual, self-control, and devotion, the aspirant gradually transforms ordinary attachment into spiritual awareness. It's a process. It's not you have to jump to from one process to another. You have to enjoy that process. You have to control your enjoyment, and then achieve that particular attainment. Okay. Then coming to the body and energy, because in tantra, I told you about the ritual practice. I just mentioned about the ritual practice. So that ritual practice, your body is very important for that. So within this framework, the human body functions as the central site of transformation. So here tantra consists of the subtle body, as composed of the intricate network of nadis, we call nadi. So like blood is flowing through your veins, like that nadis or energy channels are there throughout your body. They are vital force which are circulating all over your body, and at points where these channels intersect are located the chakras. I hope you have heard about Kundalini, Shakti, and chakras. So, what are chakras? That are subtle energy centers aligned along the spine of your body. This picture also presents the same thing. Okay. So these chakras correspond to different dimensions of consciousness and spiritual awareness. At the base of this subtle structure resides Kundalini Shakti, often symbolized as dormant serpent coiled at the base of the spine. So there will be one coiled serpent at the base of your spine, and that is Kundalini Shakti you have to awaken. Yeah. So the ultimate goal of tantric practice here to awaken this latent power and guide it upward through the central channel. Okay, piercing the successive chakras until it reaches to higher chakra, that is Sahasrara chakra. Sahasrara means the thousand petal lotus at the crown of your head. Okay. So this ascent represents the dissolution of limited individuality and the realization of unity between the individual self and universal consciousness. So what you are trying to do through awakening this Kundalini Shakti, you are trying to awaken your body, and you are trying to centralize with the universe. So this is the core philosophy of Kundalini Shakti and Tantra connection. Okay, so Tantra thus transforms the body into a sacred geography of liberation. So you are preparing your body for the liberation, where spiritual realization is achieved not through denial of embodiment, but through its disciplined awakening and transfiguration. Okay, so the next slide you can see of a ordinary man's body, physical body, and hatha yogi, or who is like practicing kundalini. So easily you can point out the difference, like how that energies or that nadis, through that nadis, that force or power is flowing through, right? Now here coming to an elaboration on the ritual tools and the dual spiritual objectives of the tradition. Tantric discipline is particularly significant in that it provides practical spiritual methods not only for renunciants, means who are practicing, but also for householders. Okay, so what they presents itself as a comprehensive sadhana shastra or science of realization. So there is a proper term for that, science of realization. This suits to different human capacities. As I told you, you cannot wake up and go and get achievement, get liberation or moksha. So there are stages for that aspirant also. Right. Likewise, we study in school, then college, then universities, and then go to higher studies. So like that, for aspirants also, they have like based on the human capacities, they have the stages. So aspirants are classified according to their the spiritual dispositions, as I told about the Divya, Veera, and Pashu, and they are guided. Sorry. Huh. And they are guided through a particular like guru, okay, a particular person or stage of conduct, that is achara, how you are conducting, how you are implementing that lead from ritual purity and devotion toward the direct realization of Brahman. So this is process going on, and the authentic Veera, that is heroic, is not merely an external hero, but one who conquers the inner enemies of passion, ignorance, and limitation. Okay? So our inner enemies are there: kama, krodh, moha, matsar, dambha. So that you have to first control. Okay? Accordingly, tantric culture places immense emphasis upon initiation, discipline, and the guru. Okay? So you cannot practice this whole tantric rituals on your own. You need guru. So often they are revered as a physician of the soul. Okay? Likewise, you have teacher in school. You need guru. That is compulsory in tantric practices. You cannot perform it on your own, right? So ritual practice in tantra is built upon sophisticated ritual technologies. They have proper terms, definitions, proper structure, and they are designed to activate and channel sacred power through sound, symbol, gesture, and embodiment. So these are the ways or methods. So what is basically tantra? Tantras are methods or ways from where you are articulating that energy throughout your body, right? So mantras here functions as sacred vibrations. When you like utter any mantra, normal mantra also, not like tantric mantra, you will understand that vibrations in your body. So same thing happens here. Mantras function as sacred vibrations that awaken shakti, while yantras and mandalas are here as a geometric power diagrams. I have put some abstract yantras and mandalas here. So, like they are symbolic things where they are abodes of the deity. They deity's places here. You cannot see it by your naked eye, but they are abodes of the deity during worship. So, yantras, when you are worshipping some icon, you will use flowers, you will use gandha, or you will use dhoop. Then you can call it as a fire also. But here you are using yantra. That is the medium of invoking or contacting with divinity or deity. Okay. The next thing, practitioners also engage in nyasa. What is nyasa? That is installation of mantras onto the body. That is ritual placement. Okay, so while uttering that mantras, you are aligning your body with that, and you are trying to interact with like the deity. Okay, along with this nyasa, mudras are there. They are called as gestures. Okay, hand gestures, symbolic hand gestures we call. So it used to direct and seal ritual energy. So you are controlling that, or you are maybe trying to achieving through that mudras. Okay, so these all are ways where you can take help of them and understand the form of deity. You can align your body with the deity. Since these practices are regarded as spiritually potent, they cannot be approached through textual study alone. You just read the text and you will understand only, but you cannot practice likewise. If you will practice, then only you will understand what was written in the text. So you remember the first question I told to you in the beginning. The same thing I'm saying here, that what our text includes, they include something, but they doesn't fully contain it. You have to practice it and then you will understand. Okay, so here guru becomes indispensable, and effectiveness is believed to arise only through diksha. Again, another term is there, diksha, that is initiation. That is only attained through guru. You are starting achieving or starting something to understand from tantra, you need guru, which transmits spiritual energy and awakens your power or potential within the disciple or that practitioner. Okay, so many teachings are further considered in sandhya bhasha or twilight language. Okay, what is twilight language or sandhya bhasha? That is a coded esoteric vocabulary accessible only to initiates. So if a person is initiating this or getting diksha for the tantric study, then they will only get this coded esoteric vocabulary. Okay, we have dictionary in our own like subjects. Likewise, this is the dictionary of tantra initiation or tantra practice initiation. Okay. Then the ritual worship may also include symbolic practices such as panchamakaras. Now these are going towards something esoteric, because the five M's we call it panchamakaras. M. Okay, so that is understood not merely as act of indulgence, but as a method of sacralizing ordinary existence. So you have to like give something from you to the deity. Okay, and you have to transform your experience into spiritual realization. For that, you will give that five padarthas or five things. So through this practice, the aspirant ascends from gross material perception toward the realization of the eternal truth. Okay, so everything, every mudra, every nyasa, every mantra, every yantra or mandala, they are getting you from the normal physical world or material world towards the liberation, or maybe that process of liberation. Okay, So the practical process of this realization that mirrors in the cosmological movement in reverse. How again Kundalini comes here through awakening the Kundalini and piercing the six chakras. As I already showed you that picture, so that piercing, that consciousness rises after piercing that, and then you will understand the supreme identity of your through your Sahasrara chakra. Then this ascent is enabled through Guru Shakti. You cannot only do like as a practitioner, but your Guru Shakti will be also there, and then only you will understand it. Okay, so all this is understood as manifestations of consciousness itself rather than inert material forms. Two things are there: material forms and consciousness. They are opposite to each other. Okay? Then, within this framework, Tantra articulates two interconnected spiritual goals. I already mentioned about liberation or mukti, but there is bhukti also that we will discuss in the next slide. First we will understand the mukti or liberation. Okay, so it represents the highest aim of the tantric path, total spiritual freedom. That is not only freedom for your body, but it is talking about your soul. So we know about the cycle of samsara. After death you will get birth again. That depends on the philosophy which you are following or you are understanding, but again taking this as a normal consideration, like you get birth after one death, or there is a concept of rebirth, then you will understand the concept of liberation here, because it represents the total spiritual freedom and release from suffering. Suffering means normal day life, we call it. So that is the highest point here. You can get the liberation. Unlike systems that postpone liberation until after death. So I just told about the cycle of death and birth, right? So after death, they understood like you will get liberation, but tantra emphasizes jivana mukti. So concept, what is concept? Jivana mukti, that is liberation while you are still alive in a single lifetime. That means maybe they are not believing on rebirth, but itself in your life you will get the mukti. How? Balancing both the lives, right? So these liberated beings, what they do, they continues to live within the world while fully awakened to their divine nature. See how liberated the philosophy of Tantra is. Then the next concept I was talking about, that is bhukti. So alongside mukti, they are referring worldly fulfillment, enjoyment, success, and even attainment of siddhis or extraordinary powers. So while living in the material world itself, you can get all these things. Okay, you can also enjoy your power, your success, but also you can enjoy your liberation. So whereas many Indian spiritual systems, they privilege renunciation, but Tantra adopts here another different concept, that is world affirming perspective, that views the phenomenal world itself as a manifestation of divine energy. Again, they are associating all this with divine energy. Consequently, worldly experience is not rejected but integrated into spiritual path. Again, balance is there. So Tantra therefore does not perceive a contradiction between spiritual realization and material existence. Rather, it enjoys the harmony. Okay. Now, philosophically, Tantra offers a distinct cosmology grounded in a dynamic relationship between being and becoming. That is spirit, chit, okay, and nature, that is prakriti, that I told about Purusha and Prakriti. So between being and becoming, what you are now and what you can become. So they Tantra believe on both the terms. Okay, while spirit remains changeless and eternal, Mula Prakriti is something there. Mula Prakriti means your original nature. Okay, that functions as the primordial matrix of the universe, that manifest creation and dissolution also. Okay, this picture is very powerful in that sense which I'm talking about, what I'm talking about, because this is a like picture or a miniature painting of Kali, and you can identify the gods in front of her sitting and worshipping her. So from that, the importance of energy is very well contextualized. Now, I was talking about Mula Prakriti that functions as the primordial matrix of the universe, and they manifest creation dissolution, okay, through the interplay of three gunas. Okay, we know sattva, rajas, tamas, that gunas. So in contrast to certain Vedic interpretations and regard to the phenomenal world as ultimately unreal, so tantra what affirms here the reality of the world principle, that is maya shakti. Other philosophical traditions, they say, do not go towards maya or illusion, but here what tantra is saying, you have to achieve that shakti also, that is maya shakti, as an that is an expression of brahman itself. So whatever is available, whatever is you can see on this world or in this universe, that you have to achieve. Okay, in short, the like brief of this philosophy is, you have to achieve maya shakti also. So creation here begins when brahma's will become like active. So if he want to create, then it will be created. Likewise, you have to achieve all the things which he has already created, because that has importance. If something is there in front of you, that has importance. Okay, that is the philosophy of tantra I'm talking about. Then there is another term, cosmic sound. Okay, so para shabda, so it gives this will of brahman gives rise to cosmic sound and the manifestation of para bindu. Okay, the point of that sound. From this casual principle, it emerges the power of will, knowledge, and action. These are not mere words. Will means icha. So whatever I am trying to achieve, I'll just manifest it and I will get it. No. Knowledge, it's not only book knowledge or textual knowledge. No. Action, not only you are trying to do, but you have to understand the symbolism behind that. So all of these things have deeper meanings than the word itself. Okay. This further evolve into the structures of mind and matter. Now it will go to another you can say another 1 hour or 2 hour lectures, but I'll just like only say that mind and matter. I'll not discuss it further. So the universe is thus interpreted as divine mother's leela again here. So now you can see the contradictions. They are also saying Brahma is created and now Divine Mother's Leela or Divine Mother's cosmic play. That's why I put this picture, because the philosophy is saying from Divine Feminine, all this cosmic play is happening, wherein forms continuously arise and dissolve. Okay, while the underlying source remains eternal and real. There is a that parabindu. Okay, or that like creation or the point of creation is there always. You cannot see, but you are coming from that, you are dissolving into that. Okay? So that is again another like a point for philosophy. Consequently, the Tantric worldview understands the cosmos as permitted by Shakti, personified as the supreme creative feminine energy. I just explained about this. And that is existential. I mean, you can see that also. So, Shakti is not merely an abstract metaphysical principle here, but a living and transformative force. Now, they are contradicting in their philosophies, because in several texts or in practices, you will find this contradiction where they are giving importance to each deity, and they are saying everyone is the point of creation and you are coming from them. Okay, so far from being an alien or peripheral development, tantricism emerges as a living and transformative current within Hindu thought. Okay, continually reinterpreting older Vedic structures, because before tantras, Vedic structures were very firm, and you can see they are very contradictory, having contradictory philosophy from Vedic structures. Okay, so Tantra therefore affirms both liberation and worldly engagement here. Now, one of the most discussed and frequently misunderstood dimensions about this system is Vamachara. Yes, there are two ways or methods of worship in the Tantra: Vamachara, that is left hand path, and Dakshinachara, that is right hand path. So, what are these paths? I will explain in like few sentences. So Vamachara means that is associated with ritual when you use the Panchamakaram, okay, or the five M's. That is Madhya, wine; Mas, meat; then Matsya, fish; Mudra, that is grain or ritual gesture; and Maithuna, that is intercourse or sexual union. Okay, so these ritual elements are not intended as libertine practices or acts of indulgence. Okay, you don't have to act that. That is highest or biggest misconception about the tantra, that you have to offer means you have to do that. No. So rather they function within a strictly soteriological, that means religious framework aimed at liberation. Okay, that is symbolic. You don't have to do anything about that. So through controlled ritual transgression or practitioners, they seek to dissolve that mental structures. You have to keep that five things aside, and that means you are giving that to that deity. Okay, you don't have to perform, but you have to give that away from your body. That is the original philosophy from this Panchamakara worship, or you can say the Vamachara or left hand worship. Okay, so these taboos, mental structures, we have to dissolve. So by ritually engaging with these substances and action, they are calling it as a impure. Obviously they are impure, that's why you have to take it away, right? Then come in this sense, you can see the transgression operates not as only moral rebellion, but as a disciplined spiritual strategy, which is like overcoming conditional categories of purity and impurity. Now you are categorizing this like things: impurity and impurity, sacred and profane, body and spirit. So that's why it is important. And what about dakshinachara? That is or right-handed worship. That is normal worship, what you do with flowers, with kumkum or haldi. That is called as right-handed worship, that we usually follow in our today's or daily life. Yeah. Now, coming to some historical facts. So, Tantra developed as long and evolving intellectual ritual and philosophical tradition that is shaped by yogis, philosophers, practitioners, even ritual specialists. And some scholars also studied about this Tantra like from many centuries. So, one of the earliest textual reference associated with the term appears in Panini's Ashtadhyayi, Panini's person and his work, Ashtadhyayi, which is dated around 5th century BCE, suggesting that conceptual foundations linked with Tantra already circulated in early Indian intellectual culture. Okay? However, according to the Dutch scholar Jan Gonda, the technical and literary use of this term, Tantra, can be more clearly traced to the period between 5th and 7th century CE, when what was that era marked by the decline of Gupta political authority and the rise of new religious movements across South Asia. So Gonda here, this author, emphasized that although many surviving tantric texts belong to this later period, the ritual and symbolic foundations of the tradition were considerably older. Okay, so therefore, Tantra did not emerge suddenly in late antiquity. It is again a gradual process. Even Tantra word is not like Indic or Indian word. Okay, then Tantra generally developed around three principal streams. So here, Vaishnava Tantra, Shaiva Tantra, and Shakta Tantra. Okay, so they are associated with Samhitas. Samhitas means what it has already written, textual corpus. So Shaiva traditions connected with the Agamas, Shakta traditions identified more specifically with the Tantras. Okay. Then the development of tantric systems was closely intertwined with the rise of Shaivism and Pancharatra tradition, while Shakti cults attained increasingly prominence by the 10th century. So you can imagine from 5th to 10th century, there was a long period where this term was evolving itself. Then tantric literature evolved from earlier Shaiva tantras into the Yamalas. Okay, Yamala is another kind of textual corpus. We call it for Shaiva Tantra, which incorporated a wide range of local deities, regional cults, tribal traditions, and esoteric ritual systems into that religious structure. Okay. Now we are shifting to more precise theme, that is Shakta Tantra. So in the tradition of Shakta Tantra, the goddess or Devi is not merely worshipped as deity among others, but is understood as the ground or existence or the point of existence itself. Okay, so she is conceived as Shakti, the dynamic cosmic energy through which the universe is created, sustained, transformed, and ultimately dissolved. So, as the Devi Mahatmya declares, Devi Mahatmya is the text. It says, "By you, this universe is born. By you, this world is created." Okay. So, in Devi Mahatmya, in fifth adhyaya or fifth chapter, 16th shlok, it says, "By you, this universe is born. By you, this world is created." Okay. So, unlike philosophical systems that privilege a passive or transcendent absolute, Shakta Tantra views reality as inherently active. So Devi is with you, or she is active, she is embodiment, okay, she is vibrant. So the phenomenal world is therefore not treated as illusion here. Shaktism I'm telling about, not Shakta Tantra, only Shaktism. Okay, so like goddess herself, she is manifestation, right? In every aspect of existence, body, speech, desire, ritual, nature, everything is covered with her, right? These are some Shakta tantric sources. Now we are moving to from the Shaktism or normal Shakti worship to Shakta tantric sources, which I have divided into five sections. First is foundational and Puranic sources, then Tantra Shastra and Digest, that is called as Nibandhas, then Shakta Upanishads, then Kalikula text and Shrikula text. So they, I will not go one by one. This is just list, because if you will understand the core and the philosophy of every text, it will take more time of us. So these are just classifications according to these categorizations. Sorry, the names or the list of texts are there according to categorization. Then further discussing the foundational sources like Devi Mahatmya, it provides these mythological narratives such as mantra and bhavana. Okay, so I have already explained about the nyasa mantra, but what is bhavana? That is visualization. So here you have to visualize. Now in tantric rituals, what happens? You don't have a murti or icon in front of you, so you have to visualize, you have to imagine, okay, that form, and you will not find iconography there. Okay, maybe descriptions are there how that goddess or god looks like, but in reality you will not find a physical or material any aid to understand the form of that, because today we see if Vishnu, god Vishnu is there, then you will understand, you will quickly remember four attributes are there: Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma. Then for Shakti also you will like easily say, okay, there is a lotus, and in that lotus she is sitting. But for tantric rituals, you don't have anything to see in front of your eyes, so you have to visualize. Okay, so that bhavana, that bhava is very important, and if you don't have that bhava, you cannot imagine, then you cannot practice. That is the core of your like tantric ritual. Then comes prana or breath, what you are breathing. So that breathing, that activation is dependent on your breathing. So if you are breathing slowly, very actively, then only you can feel that energy, or that energy channels in your body. Okay, so all ritual practice or tantric practice is about your body, how you are controlling, how you are understanding your body, and that is the core of tantric rituals and all actual ritual practice. Okay. Now expanding the discussion of the importance of textual and or scriptural sources in the tantra schools, they are blueprints of rituals, they are important. If I'm saying also beyond the tantra is beyond the text, texts are very important because you can see them as a blueprint. You can get knowledge, but you cannot experience that reality, okay, as a reality, because that's why we call it as a shastra versus anubhav, or the text versus experience. Okay, there is something written, but you don't know if that is true or not. You have to experience it, you have to see it, then only you will understand if that is written correct or not. Okay, now coming to the most interesting part of our like talk, tantra and stereotypes. I told you about that Vamachara practice also. So, in brief, that tantra occupies peculiar position in global imagination or in global religious system. But still, we have so many stereotypes that tell you how tantra is very esoteric, how tantra is very secretive, and you don't have to practice tantra. Tantra is black magic. So that is very general term we use, right? This is not the thing regarding tantra. As I told you about the philosophy in 4 to 5 slides, you must have understood what is that. But still, there is a first foremost stereotype, that is colonial fabrication of tantric sexuality. Okay, so you have to perform intercourse while doing that like tantric practices. No, so perhaps this most persistent and damaging stereotype in the tantra is this. So scholars such as Hugh Urban, in his work. The work name is Tantra, Sex, Secrecy, Politics, and Power in the Study of Religion. This is work of Hugh Urban, 2003. He have meticulously demonstrated how Victorian era Orientalist, I mean that type of then like Orientalist or scholars, they systematically isolated and amplified these dimensions of tantric text. So you have to just pick something out of the text and you will explain it. You will not understand the context, what in that context is given, what are another things attached to it. Okay, so that you have to understand. So British colonial administrators and missionaries found the tantra a convenient symbol of Indian degeneracy, because we are following that kind of or Vamachara, left hand path worship. They call them as a degeneracy of Indians. Okay, so which served ideologically functioning in justifying civilizational hierarchies. So we were not so-called civilized according to them, because Tantra was explaining about such things, but the context was totally different, right? There are many such I mean stereotypes. Likewise, you can see the new age distortion and commodification. Nowadays also we call it as a black magic. Okay, right? So neo, we call it as neo tantra. There is another term or another school of tantra, neo tantra phenomenon. So beginning in the 1960s and accelerating through the work of figures like Osho, and decontextualizing versions of tantra entered western spiritual market places, and there it got another viewpoint. Okay, that is neo tantra. uh, then it is also called as California tantra. Okay, that strips the tradition of its disciplinary rigor, initiated requirements or diksha. Okay, then guru lineage, that is also questioned in the stereotypes. Then there is another scholar, David Gordon White, editor of Tantra in Practice. This book is written by him. 2000, it was published in 2000. So one of the most authoritative of this subject, academician of the subject. So he explicitly critiques this reduction, arguing that Neo Tantra shares virtually no methodological or philosophical continuity with classical tantric traditions. So these stereotypes here are one of the accessibility, that idea that tantra is an esoteric shortcut to pleasure rather than demanding. So for pleasure you can practice tantra. Okay, likewise you can see on the slide there are so many like stereotypes, and two of them I have addressed here. These are my work cited from like I have taken help of these primary sources. Then these are also primary sources. These are secondary sources of previous scholarly works, you can call it. These are another slide of secondary sources. And summing today's talk, so Shakta Tantra, we can say, cannot be confined to textual boundaries alone. Texts are important, but only text will not work here, because it extends beyond manuscripts into lived practice, embodied experience, and ritual performance that is more profane than text. So the tradition is not fully captured through scholarly documentation, as it continues to unfold through the presence of the goddess. So the practitioner body is important. Dynamic ritual contexts are very important with the text. So yes, thank you so much. If you have any questions, I hope you have put in the chat box, so we can begin with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shalaka. That was, sort of so beautifully and so in such detail you have sort of described the whole Shakti Tantra. For many of us, this may have been the first real explanation rather than what you pick up from, texts. I have a couple of questions for you before anybody else puts in the questions. One is that you talked about how the Victorian era, how they sort of sidelined all practices in India and made them into. How did that impact the populace? How, what part of the population would have changed their practice, changed their beliefs, and changed their perception, or was that the belief even before that, and they just sort of amplified it?
Yes, because I told you about the text, like importance of text. So from the text, if you will not read entire text and understand the context, you will
Mm.
not understand the nature of that like subject. Sometimes what happens in very religious texts, there are deeper meanings than what is written. So from that, they didn't extract whole thing, but just extract what they understood. It's not their whole fault, I can say. But initially, we also thought as Indians, like, okay, these practices were there and these are not good practices.
Mm.
But along with that, what was the meaning of that? What was deeper meaning of that? That they didn't understood. So because of that, maybe that is my interpretation, obviously, that they didn't understand the whole topic, and that's why they put the like one strand, and they elaborated it in negative way. So
So tell me, is there, you keep, you talked very clearly, your theme was that uh, you can't just read the text, you have to practice and live the experience to understand. So that means that there will never be a way in which you can capture everything in text.
exactly, because person by person it will differ. What you will understand that I will not understand. Maybe I will understand another thing from that. So
Okay.
yes, it
It's a
varies
very
multi-dimensional.
very
Yes.
individual and multi. So I have another question for you, and that is that, especially when you talked about visualization and breath, that really combines beautifully with where yoga starts. And yoga, sort of builds from there. Those are the basic principles, and then you build on from there. So, are there any connections between um, the tantra studies and yoga?
Yes, obviously, because currently I'm working on one goddess I told about Dhumavati. Not in
Hmm.
the lecture, but I told you about Dhumavati, one
Right,
of the Dasha Mahavidyas.
right.
So she is also tantric goddess, and in that one like scholar David Frawley,
Right.
he mentioned her as a part of Hridaya or Anahat Chakra. So and also mentioned about the yoga connection with goddesses. So yes, obviously there is a connection with yoga. It starts with yoga. What is yoga is maintaining your body or awakening your body, and the same thing is Kundalini doing in higher way. Obviously there is a different thing. Yes.
Soumya Singh has a question saying, Ma'am, I have a query. Is there any correlation between the Tantra of Shaktism and Vajrayana sect of Buddhism, which is also known as Tantrayan and also was prevalent during the early medieval period around the 10th century?
Okay. Is there any correlation between Tantra of Shaktism and yeah, like you will see there are many goddesses whose name are very similar with like Shaktism or maybe in Shakti worship or Shakta Tantra and Vajrayana sect of Buddhism, because even again Vajrayana sect of Buddhism is kind of tantric like side of Buddhism. So yes, you can find many connection. Chronologically we have to see. I don't have any idea about early medieval period of 10th century now, but yes, you can see there are many goddesses. Their name, their nature, even their worship is similar. So yes, somewhere they are connected, obviously.
Okay. I think that if there are any more questions, please drop them in the chat box. We've not had any more questions. I do think that there is a lot that you have covered, and there are parts of it that you have described more, but it'll take people a lot to sort of absorb. And perhaps you'll
Obviously.
share your details if you would like to share, either your Instagram handles or any other, which people can then reach out to you for more information and guidance.
Yes, sure. So you will provide or should I provide?
No, we can also provide. I think our
Yeah,
team,
I will
Kaki
send
team,
you the email ID also, so
yes,
that will
yeah,
be good.
we can
Yeah.
do that.
Sure.
Meera Desai has a question. She's saying, it's unrelated, but do you know of a work titled My Life in Tibet?
Not really. I have heard, but I didn't read. So no, I don't know what in what context she is asking. But
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
Tibet is again related to Buddhism, so maybe that in that context she's asking. But I don't know exactly what that is work about.
Yeah. Okay. I'll request the Khaki team to drop in the Instagram handle in the chat box. Uh, uh, Jyoti, please drop in your question in the text here. And while you're typing, I'll ask Vishal's question. Which Vishal asks, could you please elaborate on the emergence of Tantra, how it is different from the Vedic and Puranic literature? I know that you did talk about it in the beginning, but do you want to say something more about it?
Yes, it's totally different because when there was Vedic practices, Puranic literature was prevalent. There was no as such tantra practices was going on, but that is again process. So that started in the perishment, or maybe like we can say the end. Not I can, so I cannot say the end for any tradition or any religion, but when Vedic practices and Puranic practices were not that much prevalent and people were not following, at that time Tantra practices started because they wanted some other way to worship and connect with God. Because somewhere Vedic practices was becoming or like contextualizing only one kind of or one part of society. So at that time they started evolving with new technology or maybe new religion. So yes, that only I can say. But you can go through many secondary sources and primary sources. For that you will find so much information and so much debate regarding that. Yes.
So Jyoti's question is Tantra connected to yoga and also sacred groves?
Yeah, it's already I have acha yoginis.
Yoginis.
Yeah, somewhere it is connected. Again, I will refer my work because Dhumavati is also called as yogini, yogini samseva, or surrounded by yogini. So yes, it's always connected to something is related to your body control, or like who is controlling body, that is yoginis and sacred gurus, obviously, because these practices are always performed in secluded areas. So sacred gurus, yes, comes in that category.
A lot of people have said that they really liked your session. It's very well explained and informative. Soumya Singh and Yogesh and so many others. Um, since there are no more questions, your Instagram handle has been dropped in the chat, so do follow Shalaka and see any more. It's there. Jyoti, the lab has just dropped the Insta handle. So thank you very much, Shalaka. That was a wonderful session. A lot to absorb and to go through and think about. So thank you very much for introducing us to the topic. And we hope to learn more about the topic through this introduction. Thank you to the audience for being here this Saturday evening. More compliments are coming your way. So thanks, everyone, and see you next Saturday.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone.